The stranger bleeding at sunset. The sun hung low over the desert, painting the rocks in shades of copper and blood. Clara Bennett pulled her worn shawl tighter against the evening chill as her horse picked its way along the narrow trail. Dust Creek lay somewhere ahead, another nameless town where she might find work for a few weeks before moving on. Always moving on. Her fingers unconsciously touched the folded papers hidden in her saddlebag documents that bore a different name than the one she used now. The war had ended 15 years ago, but some mistakes couldn't be buried with the dead. A field hospital outside Richmond, a Confederate officer who'd died under her care, though she'd done everything right, his widow's accusations, the warrant that followed. The horse's ears pricked forward, and Clara tensed. Out here, between towns, danger wore many faces. She'd learned to read the signs the way birds fell silent, how the wind changed direction, the particular quality of stillness that meant trouble. But it wasn't raiders or wolves that made her horse sidestep nervously. In the fading light, she spotted a figure slumped against a boulder near a small spring. A man, from the breadth of his shoulders. Dark hair fell past his collar, and his shirt, once white, perhaps was stained dark across one side. Clara had tended enough wounds to recognize blood when she saw it. She should ride on. Every instinct born of 5 years running told her to keep moving. But then she saw the second figure, a child, no more than 6 or 7, kneeling beside the man. The little girl's hands pressed against his shoulder, too small to stop whatever was leaking through her fingers. Against her better judgment, Clara dismounted. Her boots crunched on the gravelly soil as she approached. One hand near the Colt .32 she kept in her skirt pocket. The man's eyes opened as her shadow fell across him. They were dark, alert despite the pain etched in the lines around them. Apache blood showed in his cheekbones and the bronze of his skin, mixed with something else, Mexican, perhaps. "Please," the child whispered, and Clara's heart clenched. The girl's dress was torn, her face streaked with tears and dust. "Please help." The man tried to sit straighter, his hand moving toward his hip where a gun should have been but wasn't. "We want no trouble," he said, his accent carrying traces of Spanish and something older, deeper. "The child. She is frightened only." Clara knelt beside them, professional instincts overriding caution. "Let me see." He hesitated, then moved his hand. The wound was a clean slice along his ribs, too precise for an accident, too deliberate for a wild animal. A knife wound, and from the angle, made by someone who knew their business. "Military blade," she said quietly, meeting his eyes. "Recent." Something flickered in his gaze, surprise, perhaps, or wariness. "You have knowledge of such things." "I was a nurse, in the war." She didn't specify which side. Out here, it mattered less than back east. "This needs cleaning and stitching, or you'll be dead by morning." The child made a small, wounded sound. The man's jaw tightened. "I can pay. Gold." He fumbled for a pouch at his belt. "If you know the proper way." Clara looked at the girl again. Silent now, but her eyes brown as autumn earth held a desperate hope that no child should carry. Those eyes would haunt her if she rode away. "What's your name?" she asked the child gently. The girl's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. She pressed closer to the wounded man, burying her face against his uninjured side. "Anita," the man supplied. "My daughter, she—" He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "She does not speak. Not since her mother." He didn't finish, but Clara understood. The frontier was full of stories that ended mid-sentence, losses too fresh to name. "There's a line shack about a mile back," she said, making her decision. "Abandoned. It'll give us shelter while I work." "You will help?" The question came out rougher than he likely intended. "I'll stitch you up proper. After that, we go our separate ways." She stood, brushing dust from her skirts. "Can you ride?" "I walked this far. Then you can walk a bit further. "Anita, honey, can you help me with my horse?" The girl looked up at her father, who nodded. She rose slowly, one small hand still touching him as if afraid he'd disappear if she let go. Clara led them back along the trail, the man leaning heavily on a mesquite walking stick, Anita shadowing his every step. The line shack appeared just as full dark settled over the desert four walls of sun-baked adobe, a roof that probably leaked, and a door hanging crooked on leather hinges, but it would serve. Inside, Clara lit the stub of candle from her saddlebag and surveyed their shelter. Dirt floor, a broken chair, and a corner fireplace that might still draw. She'd slept in worse. "Sit," she ordered, pointing to the least filthy section of wall. The man lowered himself carefully, breathing shallow to avoid pulling the wound. Clara unpacked her medical supplies, not much, but she'd learned to make do with little. "Anita, I need water. There's a pot in my saddlebag. Can you fill it from the spring?" The girl looked terrified at the thought of leaving her father's side. "She can see the shack from the spring," Clara added gently, "and I'll take good care of him while you're gone." "Go, mija," the man said softly. "I will be here." Reluctantly, Anita took the pot and slipped outside. Clara knelt beside her patient, cutting away the ruined shirt with practiced movements. The wound was worse than she'd first thought, deep enough to need careful work, but clean. Whoever had done this had meant to hurt, not kill. A warning, perhaps, or torture interrupted. "This will hurt," she said, threading her needle. "I have known hurt." She believed him. Scars marked his torso, some old, silvered with age, others newer. A fighter's body, lean and hard-used, but his hands, she noticed, were gentle as they gripped the adobe wall, and he made no sound as she began to clean the wound with whiskey from her flask. "You're not full Apache," she observed, trying to distract him from the pain. "Half my mother's people." His voice stayed steady despite the tremor in his muscles. "My father was Mexican, a trader. And you?" "I hunt." She didn't ask what he hunted. In her experience, men who answered that shortly usually had reasons for their silence. Anita returned with the water. Moving so quietly, Clara barely heard her. The girl settled beside her father, taking his hand in both of hers. In the candlelight, Clara could see the resemblance, the same strong features, the same watchful intelligence, but where his eyes held wariness, hers held only fear and love in equal measure. Clara worked steadily, making small, precise stitches. The man he hadn't offered his name, and she hadn't asked bore it well, though sweat beaded on his forehead and his breathing grew ragged. "Almost done," she murmured. "You're lucky. An inch higher and it would have caught something vital." "Lucky," he repeated, and there was something bitter in the word. She tied off the last stitch and sat back. "That'll hold if you don't tear it open again. No sudden movements for a week, at least." "A week?" He almost smiled. "You ask much. I ask you to live for her, if not yourself." His eyes softened as he looked at his daughter. "Yes, for her." Clara bandaged the wound with strips torn from a clean petticoat, then helped him into a more comfortable position. Anita immediately curled against his good side, her eyes never leaving Clara's face. "Thank you," the man said quietly. "I am in your debt." "You paid for services rendered. No debt." She began packing her supplies. "I'll stay tonight. Make sure fever doesn't set in. Come morning, we part ways." "As you wish." But even as she spread her bedroll by the door, the better to guard against uninvited visitors, Clara felt the weight of the child's gaze. Anita watched her with an intensity that spoke of desperate need, of a loneliness too vast for her small frame. Outside, coyotes began their evening chorus. The desert wind whispered through the gaps in the walls, and in the flickering candlelight, Clara Bennett sat watch over strangers who felt less strange with each passing hour. She told herself it was just one night, just until she was sure the wound wouldn't fester. But deep down, in the part of her that had learned to trust instinct over reason, she knew mourning would bring complications. It always did when you stopped running long enough to care. The man's breathing evened out as exhaustion claimed him, but Anita remained awake, those solemn brown eyes fixed on Clara as if memorizing every detail, as if afraid that, like her mother, this woman too would vanish if she looked away. Clara pulled her shawl closer and settled in for the long watch. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow she would ride onto Dust Creek and forget this night, these people, this pull of connection she couldn't afford to feel. But tonight, she would keep vigil. Tonight, she would pretend that being needed didn't feel like coming home, between knife wounds and silence. Dawn crept through the cracks in the adobe walls, painting thin lines of gold across the dirt floor. Clara woke with the instinctive alertness of someone who'd spent too many years looking over her shoulder. The man, she still didn't know his name, sat propped against the wall where she'd left him, but his eyes were open, watchful. Anita lay curled against his side, one small hand fisted in his shirt. "No fever," Clara said, rising and stretching the kinks from her back. "That's good." "You stayed. Said I would." She knelt beside him, checking the bandages. A little blood had seeped through, but nothing concerning. "This needs fresh dressing." He nodded, then carefully shifted to wake his daughter. Anita's eyes flew open, immediately seeking Clara, then darting to her father's face as if confirming he still breathed. "Morning, little one," Clara said softly. "Can you help me again? We need fresh water." The girl looked to her father, who murmured something in Apache. She slipped outside with the pot, moving like a small ghost. "She obeys too quickly," Clara observed, beginning to unwrap the bandages. Most children her age would argue, or at least dawdle. She has learned the price of delay. Clara's hand stilled for a moment. There were stories in those words, none of them good. She resumed her work, gentle but efficient. The wound looked better in daylight, clean edges. No sign of infection. Yet, "This blade," she said carefully. "It's military issue. The angle, the precision, someone was trained to use it just so." His dark eyes found hers. "You see much?" "I've seen enough." She applied a salve she'd learned to make from an old woman in Kansas, calendula and honey. Good for keeping wounds clean. Cavalry carries knives like that. Officers, mostly. Yes, just that one word. But it held weight. Clara had learned to read the spaces between words, the things men didn't say. This wound wasn't from a random encounter. Someone specific had put that blade in his ribs. Someone who wore blue wool and brass buttons. Anita returned, balancing the water pot with both hands. She set it down carefully, then surprised Clara by bringing over the medical supplies without being asked. Those watchful eyes had memorized everything from the night before. "Smart girl," Clara murmured. "Too smart, sometimes." There was pride in his voice, mixed with something else. Worry. Perhaps. Smart could be dangerous for a child with Apache blood in a world that preferred its Indians silent or dead. Clara worked in silence, aware of how the man's breathing changed when she touched certain spots, not from pain, but wariness. He'd been hurt before, and not just by knives. She recognized the signs, the way he tracked every movement, how his muscles never fully relaxed, the careful distance he maintained even while letting her tend him. "There." She tied off the fresh bandage. "That should hold. You need food, though real food, not just jerky and hardtack. The town is still a day's ride, and you're in no shape for it." She sat back on her heels, considering. "There's jackrabbit in these hills. Maybe quail. I could—" A sound outside made them all freeze. Horses. More than one. Clara's hand moved to her pocket, finding the small pistol. The man tried to rise, but she pressed him back with one hand, shaking her head sharply. Voices carried on the morning air. Track ends here. Must have holed up for the night. Check that shack. Clara looked at Anita, whose face had gone pale. The girl pressed close to her father, trembling. Without thinking, Clara pulled the child behind her, shielding her with her body. Stay quiet, she breathed. Footsteps approached. The broken door creaked open, spilling sunlight across the threshold. 2 men stood silhouetted, one in cavalry uniform, the other in civilian clothes, but carrying himself like a soldier. Well, now, the uniformed one smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. What have we here? Clara stood slowly, keeping Anita behind her. Travelers, nothing more, taking shelter for the night. The soldier's gaze moved past her to the man against the wall. His smile widened. Sergeant Morrison. Fancy meeting you here, Wolf Runner. Wolf Runner. So that was his name. Clara filed it away, keeping her expression neutral. That's quite a bandage you're sporting, Morrison continued. Wouldn't have anything to do with our discussion yesterday, would it? I know nothing of your business, Wolf Runner said evenly. No, Morrison stepped inside, his companion following. Funny thing, Colonel says you rode out to warn those Apache about our supply run. Says you forgot which side pays your wages. I scout trails, I find water, I read signs, nothing more. You found something. All right, found your conscience at the wrong time. Morrison's hand rested on his sidearm. Colonel's real disappointed. Wants to have another chat with you. Clara felt Anita trembling against her back. Gentlemen, she said, putting a touch of Eastern refinement into her voice. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. This man hired me to tend his wound, a hunting accident. We've no part in military matters. Morrison's attention shifted to her, and she didn't like what she saw in his eyes. That's so, and what's a lady doing out here alone? Traveling to Dust Creek. I'm a seamstress, looking for work. Seamstress. He stepped closer, and Clara smelled whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. Mighty fine hands for a seamstress. Look more like healing hands to me. Many women learned nursing during the war. Which side? Does it matter now? Morrison laughed, ugly and short. Everything matters. Miss C, harboring a deserter's a serious crime. Less, of course, you didn't know what he was. He's not a deserter, Clara said firmly. He's a civilian scout. Was, till he broke his contract by warning hostiles about perfectly legal military operations. Morrison's companion, who'd been silent till now, spoke up, making him subject to military justice. Clara felt the situation spiraling. These men hadn't come to talk. The blood on Wolf Runner's shirt, Morrison's casual cruelty, the fear radiating from Anita violence hung in the air like smoke before a prairie fire. The child, she said quietly. Whatever grievances you have, surely they don't extend to a little girl. Morrison's gaze flicked to Anita, still hidden behind Clara's skirts. Half-breed brat'll be better off in a proper school anyway. Teach her to be civilized. That did it. Clara had seen those schools, knew what happened to Indian children stolen from their families, the cutting of hair, the forbidding of languages, the punishments for any sign of their heritage, the small graves out back. No. The word came out harder than she intended. Morrison's eyebrows rose. No. You want him. Take him. But the child stays with me. Clara? Wolf Runner's voice held warning. She ignored him. I'm traveling to Dust Creek anyway. I'll take her to the missionary school there. The lie came easily. Surely that satisfies your concern for her welfare. Morrison studied her, and she could see him weighing options. 2 men against a wounded scout, and a woman wouldn't look good in reports. But if the woman cooperated, took the child willingly. Papers, he said finally. I beg your pardon. Your papers. Proof of who you are. His smile was sharp. Can't just hand over a child to any stranger, can we? Clara's heart sank. Her papers were forged, and not well. They'd pass casual inspection, but not close scrutiny. "They're in my saddlebags." "Get them!" She had no choice. Moving carefully, she retrieved the worn documents. Morrison examined them, frowning. "Clara Bennett, from Illinois." "Yes. Funny, you don't sound like Illinois. Sound more like Virginia to me. Maybe the Carolinas." "I've traveled extensively." "Have you now?" He pocketed the papers. "Tell you what, Miss Bennett, you come along with us. We'll sort this out at the fort. Make sure you're who you say you are. Then you can take the brat wherever you like." Clara knew a trap when she heard one. Once at the fort, they'd telegraph back east, find out who she really was. The warrant would surface, and Anita would disappear into one of those schools, if she was lucky. If not, "I think not," she said quietly. Morrison's face darkened. "Wasn't really asking, miss." "And I wasn't really answering." Her hand found the pistol in her pocket. "Now, I suggest you leave. This man needs rest, and you're disturbing him." The silence stretched taut. Morrison's companion shifted, hand moving toward his weapon. Anita pressed closer, a small whimper escaping her throat, and Wolf Runner, despite his wound, gathered himself like a cat preparing to spring. Then Morrison laughed. Well, well, got ourselves a regular Florence Nightingale here. Tell me, Miss Bennett or whoever you are willing to die for a half-breed scout and his mute brat?" "Are you willing to kill a woman in cold blood?" Clara countered. "Because that's what your report will say. That's what the newspapers will print. Cavalry murders seamstress. Won't look good for your colonel's supply run." Morrison's jaw worked. She'd hit a nerve. Whatever this supply run was, they wanted it kept quiet. Dead women and children would draw attention. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Wolf Runner, you've got a day's grace. After that, we come for you proper, with a full squad." His eyes found Clara. "And we'll be checking on you too. Miss, best you really head for Dust Creek. Best you forget what you've seen here." They left, taking their time, making noise, a message. Clara stayed frozen until the hoofbeats faded, then sagged against the wall. "Why?" Wolf Runner's voice was rough. "I don't know." It was the truth. She'd spent 5 years avoiding trouble, and here she'd walked straight into it. For strangers. For a child who wouldn't speak and a man whose name she'd just learned. Anita emerged from behind her, those dark eyes wide with something Clara couldn't quite read. Hope, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit. Someone else who stood between the child and a world that wanted to devour her. "You should go," Wolf Runner said. "Now, before they change their minds." "You can't ride, not with that wound." "I have ridden with worse." "Not with her, you haven't." Clara gestured to Anita. "She needs stability, rest. You both do. And you need to be far from us, from me." Morrison wasn't lying. "I broke contract, warned my mother's people about a raid disguised as a supply run. They'll come for me. Then we'd better move." Clara surprised herself with the we. When had she started thinking in plurals? "I know these hills. There's places to hide, but not here. This is the first place they'll check." Wolf Runner studied her with those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "You have your own troubles. I saw how you paled when he asked for papers." "We all have troubles out here. Not like mine." "Maybe not, but that's my choice to make." She turned to Anita. "What do you think, little one? Should we find somewhere safer?" The girl looked between them, her father, wounded but trying to hide it, and this strange woman who'd stood between her and the soldiers. Then, so quietly, Clara almost missed it. Anita nodded. Anita. It wasn't speech, but it was communication. A start. "There's a box canyon about 5 miles north," Clara said, already planning. "Good water. Shelter from wind. Defensible." if it comes to that. You're not a seamstress, Wolfrunner observed.
And you're not just a scout.
They looked at each other. Two people with secrets, with pasts that didn't bear close examination. But sometimes, Clara thought, that was what the frontier was for. A place where people could be who they needed to be, not who they'd been. Can you ride? She asked.
I can try.
Then we move. Now, before they decide that report isn't worth the trouble. As they prepared to leave the shack that had sheltered them, Clara caught sight of something that made her pause. Where Anita had slept, pressed into the dirt, was a small handprint. Such a tiny mark to leave on the world, so easily erased. Clara thought of the schools Morrison had mentioned, of silent children with scarred hands from rulers wielded to beat their languages away, of small bodies that never made it home. No, not this child, not while Clara drew breath. She didn't know why she'd chosen to stand with these strangers. Maybe it was the way Anita watched her, desperate and hopeful. Maybe it was Wolfrunner's quiet dignity in the face of betrayal. Or maybe she was just tired of running alone. Whatever the reason, the choice was made. The consequences would follow soon enough. They always did. But for now, there was only the morning sun, the desert stretching endless and unforgiving, and 3 broken people trying to stay ahead of the storm. She was supposed to leave, but the child held on. The box canyon proved to be everything Clara had promised sheltered, with a small spring feeding a cluster of cottonwoods, and only one way in or out. They'd made camp beneath an overhang of red rock that formed a natural shelter. 3 days had passed since their flight from the line shack. 3 days of careful movement and watchful silence. Wolfrunner's wound was healing well. Clara had kept it clean, changed the dressings twice daily, and watched for signs of infection that never came. He was tough as leather, this man who'd given his name but little else. Each day he grew stronger, moved easier, needed her less, which meant it was time to go. Clara packed her medical supplies in the pre-dawn darkness, moving quietly to avoid waking the others. She'd stayed longer than intended, longer than was safe. Morrison and his men would be looking for all of them by now. The smart thing, the only thing, was to put distance between herself and this small family that wasn't hers. She'd left her payment on a flat stone near Wolfrunner's bedroll, the gold coins he'd given her, plus a few medicines he might need. More than fair trade for 3 days' work. Her horse stood saddled and ready, provisions packed. She could make Dust Creek by nightfall if she pushed hard. Clara took one last look at the sleeping forms beneath the overhang. Wolfrunner lay on his back, one arm protective across his ribs. Anita was curled against his side, her face peaceful in sleep. In daylight, the child was all watchful eyes and careful movements. Only in dreams did she look her age. Time to go. Clara had taken 3 steps toward her horse when she heard it a soft whimper, like a wounded animal. She turned to see Anita sitting up, her eyes wide with confusion that quickly shifted to alarm. The girl's mouth opened in a silent cry, and she scrambled to her feet, bare feet slipping on the sandy ground. "Shh, it's all right," Clara whispered. But Anita was already running toward her, dark hair streaming behind like a banner. The child crashed into Clara's legs, small arms wrapping tight around her skirts, holding on with desperate strength. "Anita, honey, I have to—" But the girl was shaking her head frantically, her face pressed against Clara's skirt. No sound came from her throat, but her whole body spoke eloquently, pleading, begging, refusing to let go. Clara's hands hovered uncertainly before settling on the child's thin shoulders. "I can't stay. You understand that, don't you? Your father's healing well. He doesn't need me anymore." Anita pulled back just enough to look up, and Clara's heart clenched at what she saw. Tears streamed down the girl's face, but it was the expression in her eyes that undid Clara not just fear of abandonment, but recognition. This child had watched someone leave before, someone who hadn't come back. "Your mother?" Clara asked softly. Anita's face crumpled. She pressed closer, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Clara found herself kneeling, gathering the child into her arms without conscious thought. Anita clung to her as if Clara were the only solid thing in a world of shifting sand. "What makes you think she wants to leave?" Clara looked up to find Wolf Runner awake, propped on one elbow. In the growing light, she could see the question in his eyes wasn't just about Anita. "My presence puts you both in danger," Clara said. "Morrison was suspicious of my papers. If they investigate—" "They're already investigating. Your leaving changes nothing except—" He paused, looking at his daughter. "Except what it does to her. She barely knows me." "She knows enough." Wolf Runner sat up carefully, mindful of his wound. "My daughter hasn't held to anyone since her mother died. 8 months of silence. 8 months of staying always within arm's reach of me, as if I too might vanish if she looks away." Clara felt Anita's grip tighten at her father's words. The child understood more than her silence suggested. "But you," Wolf Runner continued. "She reached for you that first night. She helps you without being asked. She sleeps through the night when you're near." His voice roughened. "Do you know what I would give to see her at peace?" "I'm a stranger," Clara protested, even as her arms tightened around the trembling child. "A few days don't make me—" "Family," Wolf Runner finished. "No, but the heart doesn't count days. Anita's mother used to say the spirits know their own— Perhaps—" He trailed off, but Clara heard what he didn't say. Perhaps his daughter had recognized something in Clara, some kindred brokenness that called to her own, or perhaps a child's heart simply knew what adult minds complicated, that here was someone who would stand between her and harm. "I have my own troubles," Clara said quietly. "My past. We all have pasts out here. What matters is the present. And presently, my daughter is holding to you like a lifeline." He studied her with those dark, knowing eyes. "The question is whether you can let her—" Clara looked down at Anita, who had pulled back enough to watch her face. Those brown eyes held such hope, such fear. When had Clara last mattered this much to anyone? When had anyone looked at her and seen not what she'd done, but what she might yet do? "I don't know how to be what she needs," Clara admitted. "Neither did her mother. At first, neither did I." Wolf Runner's smile was rueful. "Children don't come with instructions, especially out here. We learn as we go. And if Morrison comes, he'll come whether you're here or not. At least together we have a chance. I can fight, once this heals." He touched his bandaged ribs. "You can shoot. I saw how you held that pistol. And Anita has the sharpest eyes in the territory. We're not helpless." Clara felt something shift inside her chest. Some wall she'd built stone by stone over 5 years of running. Anita must have sensed it too, because her death grip eased slightly. She pulled back to look at Clara's face, her own tear-stained but hopeful. "I don't promise to stay forever," Clara said carefully. "I can't promise that." Anita nodded solemnly, as if even a qualified yes was more than she dared hope for. "But for now, I suppose we should start some breakfast." Clara stood, Anita's hand still clutched in hers. "That rabbit you snared yesterday should make a decent stew." Wolf Runner's smile was answer enough. He rose carefully, and Clara saw him breathe deeper than he had in days, as if some weight had lifted. They moved about the morning tasks, building up the fire, heating water, preparing food with the easy rhythm of people who'd found their patterns. Anita shadowed Clara's every movement, occasionally reaching out to touch her sleeve or skirt, confirming she was still there. As the sun climbed higher, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not safety that was too much to ask for any of them. Not happiness, exactly too many shadows lurked for that. But perhaps belonging. The dangerous comfort of being needed. Of mattering to someone beyond a transaction of coins for services. "You could have left in the night," Wolf Runner said quietly as they ate. Why wake her? Clara watched Anita carefully soaking hard biscuits in her stew, her movements precise and thoughtful. I wanted to say goodbye. I owed her that much.
And now,
Clara sighed. Now I suppose we need to think about more permanent shelter. This canyon is good for hiding, but winter's coming. She'll need warmer clothes. You'll need time to fully heal. We'll need supplies. We, he repeated, and she heard the question in it. For now, Clara said firmly, we'll take it day by day. Anita looked up at that, and for the first time since Clara had met her, the child's mouth curved in a tiny smile. Not much, just a slight lifting at the corners, but genuine. It transformed her solemn little face, revealing the child beneath the watchful wariness. Clara found herself smiling back, and in that moment, her carefully planned departure crumbled entirely. How could she leave now? Having seen that smile, how could she walk away from this child who'd chosen her, this man who trusted her with his daughter's fragile heart? Morrison and his men were still out there. Her own past still chased her. Wolf Runner's secrets, whatever had driven him to warn his mother's people and earn the army's wrath, still hung unspoken between them. They were three damaged souls in a harsh land, with winter coming and danger on all sides. But Anita's small hand in hers was warm and trusting. Wolf Runner's quiet strength was a bulwark against her fears. And for the first time in 5 years, Clara Bennett, or whoever she truly was beneath the assumed name, felt the dangerous stirring of hope. There's a place, Wolf Runner said suddenly, north of here. A valley the Apache call the Sheltered Place. Good water, game, protection from winter storms. My mother's people sometimes winter there, but they would welcome us. The army doesn't know of it. It's been kept secret for generations. He paused. I could take you there, both of you, if you're willing. Clara looked at him. This man she barely knew, offering her sanctuary among people who had every reason to mistrust her kind. Then at Anita, whose eyes had brightened at the mention of a safe place. A real home, however temporary. How far? 4 days' ride, 5 with a child. We'd need supplies. I have some money saved. Not much, but enough for basics. Clara found herself planning, her mind already working through logistics. There's a trading post 2 days west. Less chance of running into Morrison's men there. You're certain? Was she? Clara looked down at their joined hands, her own, work-worn and capable. Anita's? Small and brown and trusting. When had she last been certain of anything beyond the need to keep moving, keep hiding? No, she admitted, but I'm willing to try. Anita squeezed her hand, and in that pressure, Clara felt the weight of trust, the burden of being chosen. It terrified her. It thrilled her. It made her feel alive in a way she'd forgotten was possible. The sun climbed toward noon, and the desert sang with heat and distant hawk cries. Somewhere beyond this sheltered canyon, men with guns and questions searched for them. Somewhere in the east, a warrant bore a name she no longer used. But here, now, in this moment, Clara Bennett sat with her strange new family and let herself believe in the possibility of tomorrow. Day by day, Wolf Runner agreed, and his smile held understanding. Day by day, it wasn't much of a promise, but for people like them, it was enough. It was, perhaps, everything. Clara squeezed Anita's hand in return and began planning for a future she'd never expected to want. Wolf Runner's past and the Raider's truth. The evening fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the canyon walls. They'd been in the sheltered place for 2 weeks now, and Clara had begun to believe they might actually be safe. The Apache who wintered here had welcomed them with cautious courtesy, Wolf Runner's mother's people, who remembered him as a boy and treated Anita with the gentle care reserved for wounded birds. But tonight, something had changed in Wolf Runner's eyes. He'd been quiet all day, ever since a young Apache runner had brought news from the south. Now, as Anita slept peacefully against Clara's side, He finally spoke. "You deserve to know why they hunt us," he said, his voice low. "Why Morrison wants me dead." Clara adjusted the blanket around Anita's shoulders.
You don't owe me explanations. I owe you truth. You've risked everything for strangers.
He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "My name is Caleb Wolfrunner. My father called me Alejandro. The army knows me as Scout Walker. 3 names for one man." Clara understood that. She'd worn different names like clothes, changing them with the seasons and circumstances. "I've scouted for the army for 8 years, he continued. "Good pay, respect of a sort. They needed someone who could read both Apache sign and Mexican trails. I told myself I was keeping peace, preventing worse bloodshed."
And were you?
"Sometimes. I found water when troops were dying of thirst. Led patrols around Apache camps when hotheads wanted to attack. Talked down warriors and soldiers both." His smile was bitter. "The perfect intermediary. Too white for the Apache, too Apache for the whites. Mexican blood making me suspect to both." Clara knew that feeling, belonging nowhere, trusted by none. What changed? Colonel Marcus Thornton arrived 6 months ago. New commander, new ideas. He'd made his reputation in the Plains Wars. Believed the only good Indian. He trailed off, glancing at his sleeping daughter. "I understand." Thornton brought Morrison with him. His personal enforcer. They had plans. These men, the Apache, were too quiet. They said too peaceful. Bad for careers built on conquest. Wolfrunner's hands clenched. So they decided to create the war they needed. The fire popped, and Clara instinctively checked Anita. But the child slept on. These days, she slept deeper, nightmares coming less often. Clara's presence seemed to hold them at bay. "Thornton had made a deal," Wolfrunner continued, "with Samuel Dietrich, a merchant from St. Louis. Government contracts for supplies, blankets, food, ammunition, all legitimate on paper. But half those supplies would be diverted, sold to Comancheros, to Mexican raiders, to anyone with gold. The army would report them delivered to the reservation. The Apache would report them never received. And in the confusion, they'd blame the Apache for stealing them. Worse, they'd stage raids. Thornton's men dressed as Apache, attacking settlers. Create enough fear, enough anger, and no one asks questions when you request permission to pacify the hostiles." His voice turned harsh. A tried-and-true method. Thornton had done it before, in Kansas. Made him a hero, got him promoted. Clara felt sick. She'd seen enough of war to know how easily truth became casualty. "But you found out." Dietrich got drunk, bragged to the wrong woman, Maria, who serves at the officers' mess. She'd lost her husband to Comancheros, knew what those weapons would mean in the wrong hands. She came to me. "And you believed her?" "I investigated, found the altered manifests, the secret correspondence. Thornton was careful, but not careful enough. He'd forgotten that a half-breed scout might actually be able to read. The bitterness was sharp now. I had a proof, documents, letters in Thornton's own hand." "What did you do?" "What I thought was right. Went to Major Kellerman, Thornton's superior, an honest man. I thought he promised to investigate, told me to say nothing until he could act." Wolfrunner laughed, short and ugly. "I was a fool. Kellerman was retiring in 2 months. Didn't want scandal on his watch. He burned my evidence and told Thornton everything." Clara could see where this led. A scout who knew too much, who'd proven he couldn't be trusted to stay silent. "They tried to kill you." "Not immediately. First, they tested me, sent me to guide a supply convoy to the Apache camp at Willow Springs. Only when we got close did I realize what we really carried, not supplies, but soldiers, ready for slaughter. The Apache there were mostly women, children, elders. The warriors were away hunting. You warned them. I led the convoy in circles for 2 days, then slipped away at night, rode hard to Willow Springs, told them to scatter. By the time Thornton's men arrived, they found an empty camp. His jaw tightened. Thornton was furious, but he couldn't prove I'd warned them. Not at first. Morrison. Clara guessed. Morrison. The name came out like a curse. He'd been following me, saw me enter the Apache camp, would have killed me there, but I had friends watching. So he waited, caught me alone 3 days later, coming back from visiting Anita at the mission school. Clara stiffened. Mission school. Her mother's dying wish. Pain flickered across his face. Said Anita needed to learn the white ways to survive. I honored that wish, though it tore my heart. Left her at St. Catherine's. Visited when I could. She was there 6 months. What happened? She stopped speaking the day her mother died. At the school. They thought she was being defiant, punished her for it. His voice went deadly quiet. I found the marks on her hands, the bruises. She'd lost weight, wouldn't meet my eyes. So I took her, stole my own daughter in the night like a thief. Clara's arms tightened around the sleeping child. Now she understood the girl's silence, her desperate clinging. Trauma layered on trauma, mother's death, father's absence, stranger's cruelty. Morrison caught you after that. 2 days after, I was tired, worried about Anita, not watching carefully enough. He wanted to know where I'd hidden the documents I'd copied. Oh yes, I'd made copies before going to Kellerman. Wasn't completely foolish. But those papers were my only insurance. If I gave them up, he'd have killed you immediately. Yes, so I refused. He tried to persuade me. Wolf Runner touched his ribs where the knife wound had been. I've had worse, but then he mentioned Anita. Said accidents happen to half-breed brats. Said the school would take her back, teach her properly this time. Clara felt cold despite the fire. He threatened a child. Morrison has no lines he won't cross. Neither does Thornton. They're making too much money from this scheme to let one scout stop them. He met her eyes. That's why I can't let them take me alive. Not because I fear death, but because they'll use Anita against me. And if I break, if I tell them where those documents are. More people die, Apache and White both. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Thornton's planning something big. I saw references to it in the paper's final solution, he called it. A coordinated attack on every Apache band in the territory, justified by the fake raids his men are staging. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of revelation settling between them. Clara understood now why he'd been willing to die rather than return with Morrison, why he kept moving despite his wounds, why trust came so hard to him. The documents, she said finally. Where are they? Safe, hidden where no white man would think to look. His smile was grim. My mother's grave, in the sacred caves. The Apache know, but they'll die before revealing it, when the time is right, when I can find someone in authority who'll listen. You'll try again. I have to, for her. He looked at his daughter. For all the children who'll grow up in a world shaped by men like Thornton. But first, I need to heal. Need to keep Anita safe. He paused. Need to trust someone besides myself. Clara felt the weight of that admission. Trust was a luxury neither of them had been able to afford. Yet, here they were, sharing truths by firelight while a child slept between them. In Illinois, she said quietly, there was a Confederate officer, young man, barely 20, gut shot. I did everything right, everything I knew, but infection set in. He died screaming, calling for his mother. She stared into the fire. His wife was connected, said I'd poisoned him, murdered him for being Confederate, said I was a Union spy. Were you? I was a nurse. I treated blue and gray alike. But that didn't matter. She wanted someone to blame, and I was convenient, foreign-born, no family to defend me. The warrant went out. I've been Clara Bennett ever since. What was your name before? She hesitated. It had been so long since she'd spoken it. Catherine O'Malley. Irish. County Cork. Came over during the hunger when I was 12.
Learn nursing from the Sisters of Mercy in Chicago. She smiled sadly. Thought I was doing God's work, healing the wounded. Turns out God has a dark sense of humor. Or perhaps he knew what he was doing. Wolf Runner's voice was thoughtful. Catherine O'Malley might never have stopped for a wounded scout and his daughter, but Clara Bennett did. She looked at him, this man who trusted her with his truth, his daughter, his fragile hope for justice. Now what? Now we survive. Winter here. Let the search die down. In spring, I'll find a way to get those documents to someone who'll listen. There are honest men in the Army still. Captain Hayes at Fort Grant, Major Coleman at Fort Buchanan. Someone will act if presented with proof. And if they don't, then I keep trying. What else can I do? Let Thornton and Morrison profit from blood. Let them destroy my mother's people for career advancement. He shook his head. I may be just one man, but sometimes one voice speaking truth is enough. Clara thought of all the ways one voice could be silenced. But she also thought of Anita, beginning to heal, beginning to trust, of this strange family forming in the wilderness, of the possibility that running might not be the only answer. Not one voice, she said quietly. Not anymore. He looked at her across the dying fire, and something passed between them, understanding, perhaps partnership, the recognition that they were stronger together than apart. Thank you, he said simply. Anita stirred, murmuring something in her sleep. Clara soothed her automatically, and the child settled. Such a small gesture, but it spoke of acceptance, of belonging, of home, however temporary. We should sleep, Clara said. Dawn comes early. But neither moved immediately. The stars wheeled overhead, and the night sounds of the desert played their ancient music. Somewhere out there, violent men plotted violence. Somewhere, papers hidden in sacred ground waited to speak truth. Somewhere, justice might yet prevail. But here, now, in this moment, 3 broken people sat together in the firelight, no longer quite so alone. It wasn't much against the darkness of the world, but it was enough. It was a beginning. The desert tests more than stitches. The fever came in the night like a thief, stealing Caleb's strength and reason. Clara woke to the sound of his labored breathing, the feel of heat radiating from his body, even from across their small shelter. In the dim pre-dawn light, she could see the sheen of sweat on his face, the restless movement of his hands. No, she whispered, already reaching for her medical supplies. After 3 weeks of steady healing, this was what she'd feared most, infection setting in late. When their guard was down and supplies were low, Anita woke at Clara's movement, immediately alert. The child's eyes went wide when she saw her father's condition, but she didn't panic. These weeks in the sheltered place had steadied her, given her back some of the childhood Morrison's threats had stolen. Water, Clara said quietly. Cold as you can find it. And wake Morning Star, tell her we need willow bark. Anita nodded and slipped out. The Apache women had taken to the silent child, teaching her their hand signs, including her in their daily work. Morning Star, the eldest, had medicines Clara didn't know, remedies passed down through generations. Clara peeled back the bandages with careful hands. The wound itself looked clean, no red streaks, no putrid smell. But sometimes infection hid deeper, in the blood itself. She'd seen it before. Men who seemed to be healing fine until fever took them. Catherine. Caleb's voice was rough, confused. In his delirium, he'd forgotten her assumed name. The papers. Can't let them. Hush. She pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. The papers are safe. You're safe. Anita, where's my girl? Getting water, she's fine. Caleb, rest. But rest wouldn't come. As the sun climbed higher, so did his fever. Morning Star arrived with her medicine's willow bark tea, a poultice of herbs Clara didn't recognize. Prayers in Apache that sounded like water over stones, but nothing broke the fever's grip. By noon, Caleb was lost in memories, speaking in a mix of English, Spanish,
And Apache. He called for his mother, for Anita's mother. For brothers Clara hadn't known he had. He fought invisible enemies, tried to rise to protect Anita from threats only he could see. "We need stronger medicine," Clara said to Morningstar. "Town medicine, quinine. If they have it, laudanum for the pain." Morningstar's weathered face was grave. "Town is 2 days' ride, maybe more." "I know." Clara had been calculating distances, risks, necessities. The nearest settlement was Clearwater, a mining town that had sprouted up around a silver strike. Rough place, full of rough men, but it would have a doctor's supplies, or at least a bartender who dealt in medicinal whiskey and opium. "You cannot go alone," Morningstar said. "A white woman, riding into Clearwater, the miners, the drifters. It's not safe." "Nothing about our lives is safe." Clara checked Caleb's pulse too fast, too weak. "He'll die without proper medicine." "Then take Swift Arrow, my grandson. He knows the trails." Clara shook her head. An Apache in a mining town, they'd shoot him for sport. She'd seen enough of frontier justice to know how little provocation some men needed. "I'll go alone. I've survived worse." But even as she said it, doubt gnawed at her. Clearwater wasn't just dangerous, it was exactly the kind of place where wanted posters gathered dust on saloon walls, where men with too much whiskey and too little conscience might recognize a face worth bounty money. "I'll go." They turned to find Anita standing in the doorway, her small face set with determination. She'd understood every word. "No, sweetheart," Clara said gently. "You need to stay with your father." Anita shook her head fiercely, then began signing with her hands Apache signs Morningstar had taught her. The old woman translated. "She says her father needs medicine. She says you need someone to watch your back. She says—" Morningstar paused, her eyes softening. "She says she won't lose another parent." Clara's heart clenched. This child, who'd seen too much, understood too much, but there was steel in her, forged by loss and survival. "It's too dangerous," Clara insisted. Anita signed again, rapidly. Morningstar smiled despite the gravity of the situation. "She says danger is everywhere, at least together. You watch for each other. And who suspects a woman traveling with her daughter?" Her daughter. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Somewhere in these weeks of shared fear and growing trust, that's what Anita had become. Not by blood, but by choice. By the daily accumulation of small cares, braided hair, mended clothes, stories told by firelight, comfort given in darkness. Caleb moaned, lost in fever dreams. Time was slipping away with each labored breath. "All right," Clara said finally. "But we do this smart. You wear your town clothes, keep your eyes down, stay close." She turned to Morningstar. "If we're not back in 4 days..." "We will tend him. Go, ride swift." They left within the hour. Clara on her steady mare. Anita on the gentle pinto the Apache had given her. The child rode well her father had taught her, and these weeks of freedom had improved her skills. They made good time through the desert, following trails Clara had memorized in their weeks of residence. As they rode, Clara found herself studying Anita's profile. When had the gaunt, terrified child become this determined young girl? She was still too thin, still wary, but strength showed in the set of her shoulders, intelligence in her dark eyes. They camped that night in a cluster of rocks, sharing dried meat and hard biscuits. Anita curled close to Clara without hesitation now, seeking warmth and comfort. As the stars emerged, the child pointed to different constellations, signing their Apache names. "Your father will be proud," Clara murmured, learning so much. Anita's hands moved. "Will he live?" Clara couldn't lie to her. "I don't know, but we'll fight for him. Together." The child nodded, her trust absolute. It terrified Clara. That trust made her feel powerful and helpless all at once. They reached clear water late the next afternoon. The town sprawled across a valley like a diseased growth, hastily built structures of raw wood and false fronts, streets of mud and manure, the air thick with smoke from the smelter. Men lounged outside saloons, their eyes tracking any movement with predatory interest. Clara pulled her bonnet forward, hunching her shoulders to disguise her figure. She'd changed into her drabbest dress, but she still felt exposed. Anita pressed close to her mare, playing the part of frightened child perfectly. Perhaps not playing. The general store was their first stop. Clara bought supplies they didn't need, establishing herself as a traveler passing through. The proprietor, a gap-toothed man who smelled of pickled eggs, leered at her over his counter. "Traveling alone, ma'am, that's mighty brave, or mighty foolish."
"With my daughter," Clara said coolly. "My husband's expecting us in Tucson."
"Long way to Tucson. Maybe you should rest tonight. Madame Josie's got rooms, clean sheets, if you pay extra." Clara knew what kind of rooms Madame Josie offered.
"Thank you, but we prefer to camp outside town. Cleaner air for the child."
She paid in silver, careful not to show the gold coins hidden in her bodice. Information was what she needed now, carefully gathered.
"I don't suppose there's a doctor in town?" she asked casually. "My daughter's been poorly, trail dust, you know."
"Doc Kimball's usually at the Silver Dollar this time of day, unless he's too drunk to stand." The proprietor's laugh was ugly. "Might try the barber. He pulls teeth, sets bones, probably has some medicines." The barber's shop was 2 doors down from the saloon. Clara could hear piano music and raucous laughter spilling into the street. She tied the horses carefully, whispered to Anita to stay close, and entered the dim interior that reeked of bay rum and old blood. The barber was a thin man with nervous hands. Yes, he had some medicines. Quinine, perhaps, for the right price. He disappeared into a back room, leaving Clara and Anita alone with their reflections in the spotted mirror. That's when she saw it, tacked to the wall. Among advertisements for hair tonic and notices of claim sales, her own face, sketched in black ink, "Wanted for murder," in bold letters. Catherine O'Malley, also known as Kate Malley, Catherine Murphy. The reward had gone up, $500, dead or alive. Clara's blood turned to ice. The sketch was old, her hair longer than, her face fuller, but the eyes, someone might recognize the eyes. Anita tugged at her sleeve, signing quickly, "Danger, go, now!" But the barber was already returning, a small bottle in his hand. "Quinine, best quality, $3. Highway robbery, but Clara paid without haggling. She needed to leave, quickly, before anyone looked too closely. But as they turned to go, the shop door opened. A man stood silhouetted against the afternoon light, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a deputy's star. His eyes swept the room, lingered on Clara's face, narrowed slightly. "Afternoon, ma'am." His voice was polite, but his hand rested on his gun. "Don't believe I've seen you in town before."
"Just passing through,"
Clara said, fighting to keep her voice steady.
"Getting medicine for my daughter." "That's so?"
He stepped closer, and Clara saw recognition dawning in his eyes. Not certainty, not yet, but suspicion.
"You look familiar. We met before."
"I don't believe so." He studied her, then looked at Anita. "This your girl?" Before Clara could answer, Anita did something unexpected. She opened her mouth and let out a harsh, hacking cough, the kind that made adults step back, afraid of contagion. She swayed on her feet, clutching at Clara's skirts.
"That's why we needed medicine,"
Clara said quickly, gathering Anita close.
"Lung fever. Doctor in Fort Grant said desert air might help, but—"
She let worry creep into her voice. Real worry, because Caleb was dying and they were wasting time with this suspicious lawman. The deputy did step back. Lung fever killed plenty of folks out here. Well, you best get her somewhere quiet. Though, he glanced again at the wanted poster. You know, you do look mighty like... Another cough from Anita, this one producing a concerning rattle. The child had learned too well how to play-act illness, probably from her time at the mission school, pretending to be sicker than she was to avoid punishments. Please, Clara said, letting desperation show. I need to get her to camp. Set up the tent before dark. The deputy hesitated. The barber, worried about disease in his shop, added, Best let them go. Jim, don't need sickness spreading. I suppose, but his eyes stayed suspicious. Where you camped? North of town, by the creek. I'll check on you later. Make sure you're settled proper. A threat disguised as concern. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She guided Anita out, moving steady, not too fast, like prey walking past a predator, hoping stillness would save them. They made it to the horses, made it to the edge of town, but Clara could feel eyes on them, whispers following. She'd been recognized, or nearly so. They had medicine, but at what cost? Ride? She said quietly to Anita. Not too fast at first, but once we're out of sight. Anita nodded. She'd stopped coughing the moment they left the shop. Her performance ended. They walked their horses past the last buildings, past the mine tailings, past the reach of casual observation. Then they ran. The horses stretched out, eating ground. Clara looked back only once, saw dust rising from the road. Pursuit, maybe, probably. That deputy would check the poster, check the reward, gather men. They couldn't go back to the sheltered place. Not directly. Clara's mind raced through options. Circle wide, approach from the north, lay false trails, use every trick Caleb had mentioned in his rambling stories. Can you ride through the night? She asked Anita. The girl nodded fiercely. For her father, she would ride to the ends of the earth. They turned off the main trail, heading into rougher country. It would cost them time, but time meant nothing if they led danger back to the Apache camp. Behind them, the sun set like a burning warning. Ahead, darkness offered concealment but held its own threats. Clara tucked the precious bottle of quinine inside her bodice. Next to her heart, medicine for Caleb. If they could reach him in time, if they could shake their pursuers, if. But Anita rode beside her, brave and determined. This child who'd lost her voice but not her spirit, who'd become daughter of Clara's heart without papers or ceremony. They would make it. They had to, because somewhere in the sheltered place, a good man fought fever and waited for rescue. Because sometimes family wasn't about blood but about choice. Because Clara Bennett Catherine O'Malley had run long enough. Time to fight for what mattered. Time to prove that love could be stronger than fear. The desert swallowed them. Two small figures against immensity. But they rode together, and in that togetherness lay strength neither possessed alone. The medicine grew warm against Clara's heart. Hold on, Caleb, she thought. We're coming. And through the gathering darkness, they rode toward hope. She called you Mama. The quinine had broken Caleb's fever by the third day, but he remained weak as a newborn colt. Clara tended him with the focused intensity of someone who'd nearly lost what they hadn't realized was precious. They'd moved camp after the Clearwater incident, deeper into the canyon system where even Apache rarely ventured. Better hidden, but also more isolated. Morning came soft and golden through the canyon walls. Clara had risen early to wash clothes in the stream, leaving Caleb dozing and Anita curled beside him like a protective puppy. The simple domesticity of the task-soaking shirts, scrubbing out stains, wringing fabric gave her time to think. Too much time, perhaps. She'd stopped running. The realization hit her as she spread a small dress on a flat rock to dry. Anita's dress, patched where thorns had torn it, let out at the hem because the child was growing. When had Clara started thinking in terms of seasons ahead instead of days? A sound made her turn. Caleb stood at the canyon's mouth, one hand braced against the red stone, still too pale, moving carefully, but upright.
"You shouldn't be up,"
she said, but without real scolding. After watching him burn with fever, seeing him standing felt like answered prayer.
"Needed to move. Been flat on my back too long."
He made his way to a boulder near the stream, lowering himself with obvious relief.
"Where's—"
Still sleeping. She wore herself out yesterday, helping Morningstar gather herbs. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the water sparkle over stones. These quiet moments had become precious, rare spaces between danger where they could pretend at normal life.
She called you Mama."
Clara's hand stilled on the wet cloth.
"What?"
"Last night, you'd fallen asleep by the fire. She was restless. Bad dreams, maybe. You pulled her close without waking, and she whispered Mama against your shoulder." The word hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Clara had heard it, or thought she had, but convinced herself she'd imagined it. Anita hadn't spoken aloud since her mother's death. Maybe she was dreaming of... "No," Caleb's voice was certain. "I know my daughter. Know the difference between memory and choice. She chose the word. Chose you." Clara's eyes burned with sudden tears.
"Caleb, I can't. I'm not—"
"Not what, not her blood mother. Neither was I her blood father. But that never mattered. Not to me, not to her mother, not to Anita." Clara looked at him in shock. He smiled at her expression, a real smile that transformed his weathered features.
"You thought she was mine by birth. No. Her mother, Elena. She had Anita before we met. Father was a cavalry soldier who made promises he didn't keep. When I found them, Elena was working in a cantina, trying to keep them fed. Anita was 3, all eyes and silence even then. But she's so much like you. Children become like those who love them. She learned my ways, my walk, my stubbornness. Blood's just blood. Clara, family is what you build." Clara thought of her own past, the family lost to fever on the crossing from Ireland, the loneliness that had driven her to nursing, seeking connection in service. She'd delivered babies, eased last breaths, held countless hands, but always at a distance, always ready to move on. "I don't know how to be a mother,"
she admitted. "You already are. Every time you braid her hair, every time you check her for fever in the night, every time you stand between her and danger." He shifted, wincing slightly. "That day in the line shack, when Morrison threatened her, I saw you. Saw how you moved without thinking, putting yourself as shield. That's not learned. That's instinct. Instinct can be wrong. Not this instinct." He was quiet a moment. "Elena knew she was dying. Lung sickness, probably from her time in the mining camps. We had 3 months. Knowing, she made me promise things. Send Anita to school. Let her learn white ways. I kept that promise, though it nearly killed me. And her." "The mission school," Clara said softly. "She told me something else. Near the end, said the spirits would send someone when Anita needed them most. Someone who would see her, not just her mixed blood or her silence. Someone who would choose her back." He looked at Clara directly. "I think she saw true." Clara couldn't speak past the tightness in her throat. In the stream, water continued its endless conversation with stone. Somewhere in the canyon, a cactus wren began its morning song.
"What are you saying, Caleb?"
"I'm saying what is, you're her mother now, in all ways that matter. And He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I'm hoping you'll stay. Not from obligation, not from pity, but because this feels like what was meant to be." Before Clara could respond, a small figure appeared at the canyon mouth. Anita, still in her nightdress, hair wild from sleep. She saw them and ran, bare feet sure on the rough ground. But instead of going to her father as usual, she flew straight to Clara, arms wrapping tight around her waist. Clara's arms came up automatically.
holding the child close. Anita pulled back just enough to look up, and her mouth moved carefully, forming a word with deliberate precision. Mama. Not whispered, not hidden in sleep, spoken clear and true, her first word in nearly a year. Clara's tears came then. Impossible to stop. She dropped to her knees, gathering Anita close, feeling the child's thin arms wind around her neck. Such a small word to carry such weight, such a simple sound to change everything. Yes, Clara whispered against Anita's hair. Yes, sweetheart, I'm here. I'm yours. Anita pulled back, eyes bright with her own tears, and spoke again. Papa? Caleb's voice was rough. Here, Mia, we're both here. The child looked between them, these two adults who'd found each other through her need, and smiled. A real smile, transforming her solemn face into something luminous. Then, as if a dam had broken, words began to pour out, slow, rusty from disuse, but flowing. Mama pretty, Papa strong. We stay together, stay. Together, Clara confirmed, her voice thick. We stay together. Anita nodded, satisfied, then noticed the wet clothes. I help. Such ordinary words, such extraordinary gift. Clara laughed through her tears. Yes, you can help. Your dress is almost dry. They worked together in the morning light, 3 people finding their way to being a family. Anita chattered not constantly. Her words still came with effort, but she spoke about the herbs Morningstar had shown her, about the Pinto pony's new trick, about dreams where her first mother smiled and pointed to Clara. She said you good, said you keep us safe, Anita reported matter-of-factly. Caleb met Clara's eyes over their daughter's head. Elena always did see clear. As the sun climbed higher, they made their way back to camp. Anita walked between them, a small hand in each of theirs. Such a simple thing, walking together. Such a profound change from the desperate flight that had brought them together. There's something I should tell you, Clara said as they prepared the morning meal. About Clearwater, about why we had to run the long way back. She told him about the wanted poster, the suspicious deputy, the price on her head. Caleb listened without judgment, nodding slowly. $500 is substantial money, he said finally. Yes, enough to tempt many men. Yes. He was quiet, and Clara felt her heart sink. Now that he knew the full truth, would he decide the risk was too great? She wouldn't blame him. Anita's safety had to come first. We'll need to be more careful, he said finally. Maybe head further south come spring, Mexico, perhaps, or California, somewhere your face isn't known. Clara couldn't help the hope in her voice. His hand found hers, calloused and warm. I told you, Clara, family is what you build, what you choose. We choose each other, dangers and all. Anita, who'd been listening with the intensity children brought to adult conversations, added her voice. Together, we promised. So we did, Clara agreed, throat tight again. So we did. They ate in companionable quiet. The simple meal made feast by shared company. Afterward, Anita helped Clara with the dishes while Caleb, still weak, rested in the shade. Normal tasks, made precious by being chosen rather than endured. As afternoon heat built, they all dozed, the hard days catching up. Clara woke to find Anita's head in her lap, Caleb's hand resting on her shoulder. Such casual touching, but it spoke of trust, of barriers dissolved. Evening brought Morningstar and 2 other Apache women, checking on their camp. They'd brought food, venison stew and acorn bread and news. The soldiers had come to the sheltered place, searching, but they'd found nothing. The Apache claimed ignorance, and eventually the men had left. They seek you less now, Morningstar reported. Other troubles take their attention. Raiders to the south, supply wagons missing. Much confusion. Caleb smiled grimly. Thornton's scheme bearing fruit. When supplies go missing, he'll blame Apache, build his war piece by piece.
Then we stop him, Clara said firmly. Those papers you hid, it's time to use them.
Too dangerous. They're still watching. They're watching for a lone man, a wounded scout. Clara's mind was already working. But a family heading to California, settlers looking for new land? That's different. Common enough to be unremarkable. You do that, leave everything behind. Clara looked at Anita, who was teaching the Apache women the hand game Caleb had shown her. I'm not leaving anything. I'm taking everything that matters. That night, they made plans. Not desperate schemes born of fear, but careful preparations for a future they'd build together. They'd recover the papers, find an honest officer, expose Thornton's crimes, then west, perhaps, to lands where their mixed family wouldn't draw stares. It won't be easy, Caleb warned. Nothing worthwhile is, Clara replied. Later, as stars filled the desert sky, Anita asked for a story. Her voice was still careful, words chosen with thought, but growing stronger. Clara told her about Ireland, green hills and stone walls. Caleb added tales of Mexico, markets full of color and music. Anita listened with bright eyes, then shared her own story about a mama who sang and a papa who taught her stars, and a new mama who made everything safe again. Such simple words, such profound trust. When the child finally slept, Clara and Caleb sat by the dying fire, planning tomorrow. But for now, in this moment, they had everything. A daughter who'd found her voice, a love built on trust rather than passion, a family formed by choice rather than chance. Thank you, Caleb said quietly. For what? For seeing us, both of us. For choosing to stay when every sensible bone in your body must have said run. Clara smiled. Turns out I'm not as sensible as I thought. Thank God for that. They sat together as the fire burned to embers. Three souls who'd found harbor in each other. Tomorrow would bring challenges, soldiers, and secrets. Journeys and justice. But tonight, Anita had called her mama. Tonight, they were family. And that was worth any risk, Miguel's warning. The rider came at dawn, his horse lathered with sweat and dust. Clara saw him first from her watch position on the canyon rim, a lone figure pushing hard across the desert floor, riding with the urgency of someone carrying bad news. Caleb, she called softly, not wanting to wake Anita. Someone's coming. He was beside her in moments, moving with the fluid grace that had returned as his strength rebuilt. They watched the rider approach, and Caleb's tension eased slightly. Miguel, he said, my mother's cousin, a good man. But the expression on Miguel's face when he dismounted spoke of anything but good news. He was a compact man, weathered by years of desert living, with silver threading through his black hair. His clothes bore the dust of hard travel, and his eyes held the kind of weariness that came from more than physical exhaustion. Primo, he greeted Caleb, then nodded respectfully to Clara. Senora, I wish I came with better words. What's happened? Caleb asked, leading him to their camp where they could speak without voices carrying. Miguel accepted water gratefully, drinking deep before speaking. Thornton knows you live. Morrison found the Apache who helped you, made them talk. They know about the woman who tends you, about the child. Clara's blood chilled. How much do they know? Enough. They seek a woman with healing skills, traveling with a half Apache man and a girl who doesn't speak. He glanced toward where Anita still slept. Though I hear the little one has found her voice again. This is good, at least. How long do we have? Caleb asked. They searched the southern canyons. First, Morrison believes you would run for Mexico. But when they find nothing, Miguel shrugged eloquently. 3 days, perhaps 4. The papers, Clara said. We need to get them now. Miguel's eyes sharpened. The papers still exist. Thornton has torn apart the territory looking for them. They're safe.
Caleb said. But retrieving them? He shook his head. The sacred caves are 2 days' ride through open country. If they're watching. There is another problem. Miguel's voice dropped lower. Thornton grows desperate. His scheme unravels. Too many questions from Washington about missing supplies. He plans something, how do you say, more dramatic? What kind of dramatic? An attack on settlers, big enough to demand response. He has men ready to dress as Apache. Strike the wagon train coming through Lonesome Valley next week. Families, primo, women and children. When the bodies are found. War, Caleb finished grimly. The excuse he needs to wipe out every Apache in the territory. Clara felt sick. How many families? 40 wagons, maybe 200 souls. Miguel's face was carved from stone. Farmers mostly. Good people looking for new land. They will die for Thornton's ambition unless someone warns them. Silence fell over the camp, broken only by the morning birds beginning their songs. Clara looked at Caleb, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. They could run, save themselves and Anita. Or they could act and risk everything. Mama, Papa. Anita stood at the entrance of their shelter, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her voice, still new and precious, carried clearly in the morning air. She looked at Miguel with curiosity, but no fear these weeks of safety had begun to heal her wariness of strangers. Good morning, little bird, Clara said, holding out her arms. Anita came readily, settling in her lap. This is Miguel, your papa's cousin. Hello, Anita said shyly, the word careful but clear. Miguel's weathered face softened. Ah, she speaks. This is miracle. No Elena would be proud. You knew my first mama? Anita asked. Si, pequeña, a lady of great courage, like your new mama, I think. Clara felt Caleb's hand on her shoulder, warm and steady. They'd become family so naturally. She sometimes forgot how new it all was, how fragile. Miguel has brought news, Caleb said carefully. We may need to travel soon. Anita's arms tightened around Clara. Together. Always together, Clara assured her. But first, we need to talk. Why don't you help Miguel with his horse? I'm sure it's thirsty after the long ride. The child went reluctantly, throwing worried glances over her shoulder. When she was out of earshot, Clara turned to the men. We can't let those families die. If we warn them, we expose ourselves. Caleb pointed out, Thornton will know exactly where we are. Then we get the papers first, expose him before he can act. Miguel shook his head. The sacred caves are watched. Thornton may not know exactly where the papers are, but he knows they're hidden somewhere in the holy places. Soldiers patrol constantly. Then we need a distraction. Clara's mind raced through possibilities. Something to draw them away long enough for Caleb to retrieve the documents. What kind of distraction? She took a breath, knowing what she was about to propose would horrify them both. Me, the woman from the wanted poster, suddenly appearing in a town to the east. While they chase that ghost, you get the papers. No. Caleb's response was immediate. Absolutely not. Listen. I said no. His voice carried the kind of authority that had made him valuable as a scout. You think I would let you draw their fire, risk yourself for papers that might not even convince anyone? Those families are not worth losing you. He caught himself, glancing toward where Anita was showing Miguel how she'd learned to braid rope. Not worth her losing another mother. Clara touched his face gently, feeling the tension in his jaw. And what happens to her if Thornton succeeds? If war comes, you think a half Apache child will be safe anywhere in the territory? Miguel cleared his throat. There might be another way. My brother Ramon runs a trading post at Vega Ranch, north of here. It's become, how you say, a refuge for those the law seeks unjustly, families like yours. I know Ramon, Caleb said slowly. He married that German woman, the one who helps runaway wives. See, Greta, strong woman. They have built something there, a place where mixed families can rest, where children are safe. If you could reach them, that's 5 days' ride through open country. Clara pointed out, with Anita, probably 6, and it doesn't solve the problem of the wagon train. But from there, messages could be sent, warnings given. Ramon has connections among the travelers, guides who trust him. Miguel leaned forward. And there is more. A federal marshal comes through Vega Ranch regular, James Holbrook, an honest man who asks questions about missing supplies. Caleb and Clara exchanged glances. A federal marshal might have the authority to act on their evidence, might be outside Thornton's chain of command. It's still dangerous, Caleb said. Traveling so far with a child, not knowing who we might meet on the trail. Less dangerous than here, Miguel argued. Thornton's men draw closer every day, and at Vega Ranch, you would not be alone. Others there have skills, can help defend if needed.
Clara thought of Anita, just beginning to speak again, just beginning to trust. The child needed stability, safety, a chance to be young. But she also needed a future free from the shadow of war.
What do you think? She asked Caleb quietly. He was silent for a long moment, watching their daughter carefully pour water for Miguel's tired horse, speaking to it in the mixture of English and Apache she'd developed. I think, he said finally, that sometimes the greatest risk is doing nothing. He turned to Miguel. This federal marshal Holbrook, he can be trusted. With your life, primo. He lost family in the Kansas troubles, knows what men like Thornton can do when greed drives them. Then we go. Clara felt the decision settle into her bones. We leave tonight, travel by dark until we're clear of the area. I will ride ahead. Miguel offered. Let Ramon know to expect you, and I will spread words in other directions. False trails. Let Morrison chase shadows while you travel north. They spent the day preparing. Clara packed their few possessions carefully, medicines, clothes, the small treasures Anita had collected during their time in the canyon. Caleb cleaned weapons, studied maps with Miguel, planned routes that avoided known patrol areas. Anita sensed the tension despite their efforts to shield her. She stayed close to Clara, helping with tasks, her newly returned voice asking small questions. Will the new place have trees? I imagine so. Will there be other children? Miguel says yes. Will the bad men find us? Clara paused in her packing, pulling Anita close. We're going to be very careful, and we'll be together. That's what matters most. The child nodded, but worry lingered in her eyes. She'd learned too young that safety was temporary, that adults couldn't always keep their promises. But she trusted Clara and Caleb with the fierce faith of a child who'd chosen her family. As shadows lengthened, Miguel prepared to leave. I'll lay false trail south, let myself be seen in Willow Creek. Morrison knows me, knows I help Caleb sometimes. He'll follow. Be careful, cousin, Caleb said, gripping his shoulder. Thornton's men don't play by rules. Neither do I. Miguel's grin was sharp. I'll meet you at Vega Ranch within the week. Vaya con Dios. He rode out as sunset painted the canyon walls crimson. Clara watched him go, this man who risked his life for family and justice. She understood that loyalty, it was what had kept her at Caleb's side that first night, what made her ready to face danger now. They ate a cold meal as darkness fell, not wanting fire to mark their position. Anita was quiet but steady, understanding the need for silence. She'd packed her few possessions herself, including the small wooden horse Caleb had carved during his recovery and the cloth doll Clara had fashioned from scraps. Ready? Caleb asked as stars emerged. Clara looked around their camp one last time. This canyon had been haven, the place where 3 broken people had become family. Leaving felt like closing a chapter, stepping into uncertainty. But Anita slipped her hand into Clara's, and Caleb's presence at her side was solid as the stone walls that had sheltered them. They were together. Everything else was just geography. Ready? she confirmed. They rode out under a crescent moon, 3 shadows moving north toward hope and danger in equal measure. Behind them, the canyon held its silence. Ahead, Vega Ranch waited with its promise of refuge and perhaps, if they were very lucky, justice. The desert stretched endless under stars, and Clara let herself believe they might actually make it, that love and courage might be enough against greed and hate, that a family built from choice and circumstance might survive what was coming. Time would tell. It always did. But for now, they rode together through the darkness, and that was enough. That was everything. Smoke on the mesa. They'd been riding for 3 days, keeping to the hidden trails Caleb knew from his scouting years. The landscape had changed from red canyon country to high mesas dotted with juniper and pinon pine. They were making good time, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched.
"Papa,"
Anita said from her place in front of Clara on the mare.
"Birds are quiet."
Caleb reined in immediately. In their time together, they'd learned to trust Anita's observations. The child noticed things adults missed: the way animals behaved, the subtle changes in wind and sound that preceded danger. "Where?" he asked quietly. Anita pointed ahead where the trail wound between 2 large boulder formations. Perfect place for an ambush. Too perfect. "Could be nothing," Clara murmured, but her hand moved to check the pistol in her saddlebag. "Could be." Caleb studied the rocks, reading signs invisible to Clara's eyes. "But we go around. Better to lose an hour than—" The shot cracked across the morning air, echoing off stone. Clara's horse screamed and stumbled, and she barely had time to grab Anita before they were falling. She hit the ground hard, turning her body to protect the child, feeling stones tear through her sleeve. "Down!" Caleb was off his horse, rifle in hand, pulling them behind a fallen log as more shots rang out. "You hurt?"
"No."
Clara ran her hands over Anita quickly.
"Baby, are you—"
"I'm okay, Mama." But the child was pale, eyes wide with remembered terror. More gunfire, chips of wood flying from their makeshift shelter. Clara's mare was down, thrashing in pain, and her heart broke for the faithful animal even as her mind raced. "How many shooters where?" "Wolf runner," Morrison's voice carried across the distance. "Thought you were smarter than this, leading them right down the main trail like some greenhorn." Caleb cursed under his breath. They'd been careful, so careful. But Morrison knew the territory too, had probably guessed their destination. "Got tired of chasing Miguel's ghost," Morrison continued. "Figured I'd stake out the logical route instead. And here you are, gift-wrapped."
"How many?" Clara whispered.
4, maybe 5. Caleb had positioned himself to return fire, but carefully. Ammunition was limited. "They're spread out, professional." "Let the woman and child go." Caleb called out. "Your quarrel is with me." Morrison's laugh was ugly. "The woman's worth $500, and the brat needs civilizing, though I notice she found her tongue. You can thank me for that. Fear's good for loosening vocal cords." Anita pressed closer to Clara, a small whimper escaping. Clara's fury burned cold. This man had threatened her child, taken credit for trauma that had stolen Anita's voice. He would not touch her again. "Mama," Anita whispered, so quiet Clara almost missed it.
"The wash! Behind us!"
Clara glanced back. The child was right. A shallow drainage cut through the landscape about 20 feet behind them. Not deep, but maybe enough cover to move, to flank their attackers. "Good girl," Clara breathed. "Caleb." But he'd seen it too. "When I start shooting, you run, both of you. Follow the wash north, then circle back to the horses. We're not leaving you." "Clara." "No," her voice was steel. "We stay together or we all die here. Those are the only choices." He looked at her. This man she'd come to love through quiet moments and shared dangers. Something passed between them: understanding, acceptance, trust. "Together then," He agreed. On 3. But before he could count, Anita did something that stopped Clara's heart. The child pulled free and stood up, small body exposed above the log. "No!" Clara lunged for her, but Anita was already shouting not words, but a sound Clara had never heard from human throat. It was a cry that seemed to come from the earth itself, high and ululating, carrying across the mesa like wind-given voice. For a moment, everything stopped. Even Morrison's men seemed frozen by the unexpected sound. Then, answering cries rose from the rocks around them, Apache war cries, fierce and multiplying. "What the hell?" Morrison's voice cracked with sudden uncertainty. Caleb pulled Anita down, but he was smiling fiercely. "My clever girl. Apache children learn to call for help. She just told every warrior within 5 miles that a child is in danger. And they came. Not many, maybe 6 or 7 Apache men who'd been hunting in the area, but they moved like smoke through the rocks. And suddenly, Morrison's confident position became a trap. Go! Caleb pushed Clara and Anita toward the wash. Now, while they're distracted. This time Clara didn't argue. She ran, Anita's hand tight in hers, sliding down into the drainage and moving north. Behind them, gunfire erupted different now. No longer the one-sided assault of ambush, but the chaos of real battle. They made it 50 yards before Clara heard pursuit. One of Morrison's men had broken off. Following them, she could hear his boots on stone, his harsh breathing. Closer. Closer. Keep running, Clara told Anita, pushing the child ahead. Then she turned, pistol in hand. The man came around a bend in the wash, rifle raised. Clara didn't hesitate. She fired twice, center mass, just as she'd been taught by a kind sergeant who'd said a woman alone needed to know such things. The man looked surprised as he fell, as if he'd never considered a seamstress might shoot back. "Mama," Anita was there, tugging at her. "Come on." They ran again, following the wash as it curved back toward where they'd left the horses. Caleb's mount and the pack horse were still there, frightened but tied secure. Clara boosted Anita up, then swung up behind her. "Papa?" Anita asked, voice small. "We circle back for him," Clara promised, though her heart hammered with fear. "Hold tight." She urged the horse into motion, not back down the trail but up, climbing the slope that would give them a view of the battle. They needed to see, to know. The fighting was fierce but brief. The Apache had the advantage of surprise and superior knowledge of terrain. Morrison's men, caught between the warriors and Caleb's accurate rifle, were falling back, seeking escape rather than victory. Clara spotted Caleb, still behind the log but moving, alive. Relief flooded through her. But then she saw Morrison himself, separate from his men, circling wide. He had a clear shot at Caleb's position, and Caleb didn't see him. "No," Clara breathed. She was too far for a pistol shot, had no rifle. But Anita was already moving, sliding down from the horse before Clara could stop her. "Anita." The child ran not toward her father, but at an angle, scooping up a handful of rocks as she went. Her arm came back, and she threw with the accuracy of a child who'd spent months learning Apache games. The stone struck Morrison's horse in the flank, making it rear and spoil his shot. Morrison wheeled toward her, rage twisting his features. "You little—" His words cut off as Caleb's rifle bullet took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He tried to raise his gun again, but an Apache arrow sprouted from his thigh, dropping him to the ground. Anita Caleb was running, catching his daughter as she flew to him. "Don't ever, you could have been—" "I had to," Anita said simply. "You couldn't see him. I could." Clara reached them moments later. Sliding from the horse to pull both of them close, they stood there in the settling dust, clinging to each other as the last of Morrison's men fled and the Apache warriors emerged from cover. One of them, an older man with silver in his braids, approached. He spoke to Caleb in Apache, gesturing to Anita. Caleb responded, and the man's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. He says the child has the heart of a warrior. Caleb translated, that her cry was perfect the old way, the true way. He wants to know who taught her. You did, Clara said. Without even knowing it, she learned by listening, by watching. The Apache spoke again, this time including Clara in his gaze. He says we're welcome in his territory, that a child who calls so true and parents who fight as one have earned passage. Caleb's voice was rough with emotion. He offers escort to the edge of their lands. Clara felt the honor in that offer. These men had no reason to trust whites, every reason for suspicion. But they'd heard a child in danger and come without hesitation. Now they offered protection to strangers because those strangers had proven themselves family. Thank him, Clara said. Tell him we're grateful. As Caleb spoke with the warriors, Clara examined the graze on her arm, where stones had torn through fabric. Nothing serious, though it would need cleaning. Anita helped, her small hands careful as they worked together. I was scared, the child admitted quietly. So was I. Clara told her, being brave doesn't mean not feeling fear. It means doing what needs doing despite the fear. Like you did shooting that man. Clara's hands stilled. She'd killed today, taken a life to protect this child. She waited for guilt, for horror at what she'd done, but all she felt was fierce gladness that Anita was safe. Yes, she said simply, like that. Morrison wasn't dead, though he wouldn't be chasing anyone soon. The Apache had tied him to his horse, sent him back down the trail with his wounds and his failure. He'd live, but his career was over. Hard to explain how one half Apache scout, a woman, and a child had bested his hand-picked team. They traveled the rest of the day with their Apache escort, Anita riding with one of the younger warriors who spoke enough English to answer her endless questions. The child's fear had transformed into curiosity, her natural resilience asserting itself. She's strong, Caleb said, riding beside Clara. Stronger than she should have to be. All children are given the chance. Clara watched Anita laugh at something the warrior said. She just needed to remember her own power. She saved my life today. She saved all of us. That cry was instinct, the right action at the right moment. He looked at Clara. Like you following us into that wash, like standing your ground when they came after you. We protected each other. That's what families do. As sunset approached, they reached the boundary of Apache territory. The warriors took their leave with respectful farewells, the older man placing a hand on Anita's head in blessing before they melted back into the landscape. 2 more days to Vega Ranch, Caleb said as they made camp. If Morrison was here, he wasn't watching the other routes. We should be clear now. But Clara noticed he still chose a defensible position, still kept his rifle close. Hard lessons weren't easily forgotten. That night, as they shared a simple meal, Anita told the story of the day in her careful, precious voice, how she'd known the birds were wrong, how she'd remembered the cry from listening to Apache children play, how she'd seen Morrison moving like a snake through rocks. I didn't think, she concluded. I just knew Papa needed help. And you gave it, Clara said, kissing her forehead. My brave girl. Later, after Anita slept, Clara and Caleb sat by the fire talking quietly. The events of the day had crystallized something between them, burned away the last barriers. When I saw Morrison aiming at you, Clara began. When I saw you stand to face that man in the wash, Caleb said at the same time. They stopped, looked at each other, and Clara saw her own realization mirrored in his eyes. Somewhere between that first night in the line shack and this moment by the fire, they'd become essential to each other. Not through grand declarations, but through 1,000 small choices. Through trust built action by action, word by word. I love you, Clara said simply. Both of you, with everything I am. And we love you, Caleb replied, with everything we have, everything we'll be. It wasn't poetry, it wasn't elaborate, but it was true. Solid as the earth beneath them, bright as the stars above. Tomorrow, they'd reach Vega Ranch. They'd face new challenges exposing Thornton, protecting the wagon train, building a life in a world that didn't always welcome families like theirs. But tonight, they were together. They were whole. They were home. And that was miracle enough for anyone. Vega Ranch, where wounds heal. The first thing Clara noticed about Vega Ranch was the sound of children laughing. After weeks of careful silence and whispered conversations, the noise was almost shocking, joyful shrieks, calling voices. The ordinary chaos of young life lived without fear. They crested the final ridge just as the sun touched the western mountains, painting the valley below in shades of gold and amber. The ranch sprawled across the fertile bottomland, not just one building, but a small community. Adobe structures clustered around a central courtyard, smoke rising from multiple chimneys, gardens stretching toward the creek that wound through the property.
"Look, Mama,"
Anita pointed excitedly.
"Children."
Indeed, a group of youngsters had stopped their game to stare at the newcomers. Clara counted at least 8, ranging from toddlers to adolescents, their faces showing the beautiful variety of the frontier Apache features mixed with Mexican. German fairness beside African darkness, all playing together as if the divisions that plagued the adult world didn't exist here. A woman emerged from the largest building, wiping her hands on her apron. She was tall and broad-shouldered, with wheat-colored hair braided in a crown around her head. This had to be Greta, the German woman Miguel had mentioned. "Welcome," she called, her accented English warm. "You must be Caleb's family. Miguel sent word to expect you."
Family?
The simple acceptance of that word made Clara's throat tight. No questions about marriages or blood relations, just acknowledgement of what they were to each other. As they dismounted, more people emerged, men setting down tools, women leaving cook fires, all curious but not threatening. Clara saw the subtle signs of a defensive community, weapons within easy reach, sightlines carefully maintained, everyone positioned to protect the children if needed, but overlaying that wariness was genuine warmth. "I'm Greta Vega," the woman said, clasping Clara's hands. Her grip was strong, calloused from work. "And you must be Clara. Miguel spoke highly of your healing skills. We have great need of such here." "I help where I can," Clara replied, instantly liking this forthright woman. "And this brave little one," Greta knelt to Anita's level. "Miguel says you have found your voice again. This is good. We have many children here who would love new friends." Anita, usually so cautious with strangers, studied Greta with serious eyes. Then, apparently deciding she was safe, the child smiled. "I'm Anita. Do you have horses?" "Many horses. And goats, chickens, even a very grumpy bull named Ferdinand." Greta's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps tomorrow you would like to meet them." As Anita nodded enthusiastically, a man approached, short and sturdy, with silver threading through his dark beard. Ramon Vega. He introduced himself, shaking hands with Caleb. "Your cousin is out laying false trails, but he should return soon. Come, you must be tired. We have rooms ready, and supper will be served shortly." They were led to a small adobe house on the edge of the compound. It was simple but clean, with 2 rooms and a small kitchen area, real beds with rope springs, a table and chairs, shelves for belongings they didn't yet have. After weeks of sleeping on the ground, it felt like luxury.
"This is too much,"
Clara protested.
"We can't impose—"
"You impose nothing," Greta said firmly. "This is what we do here. Provide sanctuary for families like yours, those who don't fit the narrow boxes the world tries to force us into. You'll contribute as you can your healing skills, Caleb's knowledge of the territory, perhaps teaching some of our children. We all work, all give what we have." As they settled in, Clara learned more about Vega Ranch. It had started as Ramon's trading post, But when he married Greta, a woman fleeing an abusive husband back east, it evolved into something more. A refuge for mixed-race couples, for women escaping violence, for children orphaned by the frontier's harsh realities. They survived through collective work farming, ranching, trading with travelers who weren't too prejudiced to do business with them. "We have 23 souls here now," Ramon explained over dinner. "More sometimes, fewer others. People come, rest, heal, move on. Some stay and become family. All are welcome as long as they contribute and cause no harm to others." The main hall was loud with conversation in multiple languages. Clara found herself seated between a Mexican woman who'd fled a forced marriage and a former slave from Texas who'd married an Irish miner. Across from them, Anita was already deep in conversation with 2 other children, their chatter mixing English, Spanish, and what sounded like German. "She's adjusting well," Caleb observed, his hand finding Clara's under the table. "Children usually do, when given the chance," said a new voice. A black woman had approached their table, carrying a medical bag much like Clara's own. "I'm Sarah Freeman. I serve as doctor here, though I understand you have healing skills yourself." "I was a nurse in the war," Clara replied. "Field medicine, mostly." "Then you've seen the worst and learned to make do with little." Sarah's smile was warm. "I could use the help. Would you mind if we talked later, compared supplies and knowledge?" As the evening progressed, Clara felt something inside her slowly unclench. This place, these people, they understood what it was to be outside society's accepted boundaries. No one asked prying questions about her past or commented on Anita calling her mama despite their obvious lack of blood relation. Here, family was defined by choice and commitment, not by documents or bloodlines. After dinner, the children were sent to wash up while adults lingered over coffee. The talk turned serious, to the reason Caleb and his family had come. "Thornton's planning something big," Ramon confirmed. "We've heard whispers. Wagon train massacre. Blamed on Apache. Marshal Holbrook was here last week, asking questions about missing supplies. He knows something's wrong but lacks proof." "I have proof," Caleb said quietly. "Hidden, but retrievable. Documents showing the whole scheme." "When does he return?" Clara asked. 2 weeks, maybe less. He's investigating the southern routes now, following supply discrepancies. Ramon leaned forward. "Can you get the documents by then?" "The sacred caves are 2 days' ride, well guarded, but..." Caleb glanced at Clara. "With the right distraction, it could be done." "No more separations," Clara said firmly. "We go together or not at all." "The child would be safe here," Greta interrupted. "If you both need to go, Anita would be welcomed, protected. We have done this before sheltered children while parents did necessary but dangerous things." Clara's immediate instinct was refusal. They'd just found safety, just begun to heal. But those wagon train families haunted her innocent people who would die for one man's greed unless someone acted. "We'll think on it," Caleb said diplomatically. "First, we rest. It's been a long journey." That night, in their new home, they tucked Anita into her first real bed in months. The child was exhausted but happy, full of stories about new friends and plans for tomorrow. "Maria knows how to milk goats," she reported seriously. "She's going to teach me, and Thomas, he's 8, has a wooden sword and says he'll show me defense moves. And baby Rosa is just learning to walk, and she fell down 6 times at dinner but kept laughing." "Sounds like you'll be busy," Clara said, smoothing the quilts around her. "Will we stay here?" Anita asked suddenly. "Forever?" Clara exchanged glances with Caleb. "For now," she said carefully. "While we help some people who need it. Is that all right?" Anita considered this. "The children here, some don't have mamas or papas. Did you know?" "Yes, sweetheart. But they have the ranch family. Everyone takes care of everyone." She yawned hugely. "That's good. Right, nobody's alone." "That's very good."
Caleb agreed, kissing her forehead. Sleep now, little warrior. After she drifted off, Clara and Caleb sat in their small kitchen, sharing a pot of tea Greta had left, the domestic normalcy of it sitting at their own table, in their own home. Discussing tomorrow's chores was almost overwhelming after their weeks of running. She's happy here, Clara observed. So are you. It wasn't a question. Caleb had always been good at reading her. It feels too good to be true. A place where families like ours are normal, where Anita can just be a child. She shook her head. I keep waiting for something to shatter it. Maybe that's why we need to get those documents. To protect this place, these people. He covered her hand with his. I won't pretend it isn't dangerous. But with Holbrook's help, we could end Thornton's scheme, make the territory safer for everyone. Clara thought of the children she'd seen at dinner, innocent faces that would be labeled savage in the coming war Thornton planned. Of families like theirs, always looking over their shoulders, never truly safe. When? She asked. Soon, Miguel should return in a day or two with information about patrol patterns. Then we plan properly. He squeezed her hand. Together. The next days passed in a rhythm Clara had almost forgotten existed. She worked with Sarah in the small clinic, treating everything from childhood scrapes to a difficult pregnancy. Her skills, rusty from disuse, sharpened quickly under Sarah's guidance. They had limited supplies but unlimited ingenuity, making poultices from desert plants, setting bones with salvaged wood, trading knowledge like precious currency. Caleb helped with the horses and defenses, his tactical knowledge proving valuable in positioning lookouts and planning escape routes. But Clara often found him with the children, teaching them to track small animals or telling stories of his scouting days, edited for young ears. Anita bloomed like a desert flower after rain. Her voice, silent for so long, now rarely stopped. She chattered with other children, sang songs Greta taught her, even began learning letters with the ranch's informal school. The haunted look faded from her eyes, replaced by the simple joy of childhood rediscovered. On their fourth evening, Clara was returning from the clinic when she heard it. Anita's laughter, bright and unrestrained. She followed the sound to find her daughter playing some sort of tag game with 5 other children, racing between buildings with the abandon of one who'd forgotten to be afraid. Beautiful sound. Yes, Greta appeared beside her. The laughter of children who feel safe. It's why we built this place. How do you stand it? Clara asked suddenly. Knowing it could all be destroyed, that men like Thornton could sweep in and... By fighting back in our own way. By creating something worth defending. Greta's face was serene, but her eyes held steel. Every child who grows up knowing love instead of hate. Every family that finds peace here. Even briefly, that's our resistance. That's how we win. That night, Miguel returned with news. The patrols around the sacred caves followed a predictable pattern. There was a window narrow, but possible when the documents could be retrieved. Day after tomorrow, he said. New moon. Darkness will be our friend. Clara looked at Caleb, saw her own determination mirrored in his eyes. They'd found paradise of a sort here at Vega Ranch. Now it was time to fight for it. We'll be ready, she said. That night, she held Anita extra long at bedtime, memorizing the weight of the child in her arms, the scent of her hair, the sound of her breathing. Tomorrow she'd have to tell her they were leaving, just for a few days. Tomorrow, the fear would return to those brown eyes. But tonight, Anita slept peacefully in her bed, safe in a place where wounded hearts learned to heal. And Clara vowed silently to do whatever it took to protect this sanctuary, this second chance at family, this unexpected gift of home. The work of healing, she'd learned, was never truly done. But here at Vega Ranch, surrounded by others who understood that truth, the burden felt shared and sharing. Clara was discovering. Made all the difference. You weren't just hired, you were sent.
The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the valley as Clara and Caleb climbed the gentle slope behind Vega Ranch. They'd returned from their dangerous mission 3 days ago, the precious documents now safe in Marshal Holbrook's hands. Thornton was under arrest, his scheme exposed. The wagon train warned and rerouted to safety. The immediate danger had passed, but something deeper had shifted in those tense days of retrieving evidence and racing against time. Below them, the ranch buzzed with its usual activity. Clara could see Anita in the vegetable garden with the other children, her laughter carrying on the breeze. The child had handled their brief absence with more grace than Clara had expected, secure in the knowledge that they would return. The ranch community had wrapped around her like a warm blanket, and Anita had emerged from the experience stronger, more confident in her place in the world. "She's teaching Maria those Apache hand signs," Caleb observed, following Clara's gaze. "Says they need a secret language for their adventures." "Our daughter, the diplomat," Clara smiled, "building bridges without even knowing it." They reached a flat outcropping that overlooked the entire valley. The buildings clustered like a small village, the creek winding silver through the cottonwoods, the mountains rising protective on all sides. Caleb had brought her here with purpose. She could tell. There was something weighted in his movements, something he'd been working up to saying. "When I first saw you that night," he began, "kneeling beside me with your healer's hands and worried eyes, I thought you were just another traveler, someone who'd patch me up and move on." That was the plan, Clara admitted. "Always was, before. But you stayed. Anita needed me." "We both did, though I was too proud to see it at first." He reached into his pocket, drawing out something wrapped in soft leather. "My mother gave this to me before she died, said to keep it for the woman who would complete our family." He unwrapped the object carefully. It was a necklace, silver and turquoise in the Apache style, but with delicate Mexican metalwork woven through the design, beautiful in its blending of traditions, much like the man who held it. "Elena wore it at our joining ceremony," he continued. "She gave it back before she passed, said it wasn't hers to keep forever, said," his voice roughened, "said the spirits would send the right woman when Anita and I needed her most." Clara's breath caught as he held out the necklace. The silver caught the light, warm as promise. "I'm not asking for papers or ceremonies the white world requires," Caleb said. "Those mean nothing to me, but I am asking if you'll wear this, if you'll let the world know we're bound, not just by circumstance, but by choice, by love." Clara thought of the journey that had brought them here, the fear, the running, the gradual building of trust. She thought of Anita, who'd chosen her as surely as she'd chosen Anita, of this man who'd seen her at her worst and wanted her still. "Yes," she said simply, and turned so he could fasten the necklace around her throat. The silver was cool against her skin, but Caleb's hands were warm as they settled on her shoulders. They stood together, looking out over the valley that had become home. "I was going to say you hired me to stitch a wound," Clara said softly. "But that's not really true, is it? You never actually hired me. I just stayed." "Because you were meant to." He turned her to face him. "Miguel believes in fate, says some meetings are written in the stars before we're even born. I never believed that before. And now I think maybe the spirits knew what they were doing, sending a healer to 2 broken people, someone who'd see past blood and skin to what truly matters." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "You weren't just hired, Clara. You were sent. You were gift." She kissed him then, there on the hillside with the sun painting the world gold and their daughter's laughter floating up from below. It wasn't their first kiss that had come during the desperate ride back from the sacred caves, when they'd thought they might not survive. But this was different. This was a promise, a claiming, a recognition of what they'd built together. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Clara touched the necklace at her throat. Elena had good taste. In jewelry and in people. Caleb's smile was soft.
She would have liked you. Would have been glad to know Anita had you. I wish I could have met her. Thanked her for raising such a remarkable child. You honor her memory every day, every time you mother Anita, every time you show her she's worthy of love exactly as she is. He took her hand. Come, there's something else. They walked down the other side of the hill to a small grove of cottonwoods. There, the ranch community had gathered Sarah and Greta, Ramon and Miguel, all the families who'd become theirs. Anita stood in the center, bouncing with excitement, clearly in on whatever was planned. Mama, Papa! She ran to them, grabbing their hands. Everyone's here! So we see, Clara said, confused but touched by the gathering. Greta stepped forward. In the old country, my country, when two people decide to bind their lives, the community witnesses, not for law, but for love, to promise we will support this family as they have supported us. One by one, the people of Vega Ranch came forward. Sarah brought a quilt she'd been secretly working on, stitched with patterns from many traditions. Ramon offered a leather-bound journal for recording their family's story. The children brought wildflowers, songs, small treasures made with their own hands. Miguel was last, carrying something carefully wrapped. From the Apache who helped you on the mesa, he said. They remembered the child who called for help, the parents who fought as one. It was a cradle board, beautifully crafted, sized for an infant. Clara's eyes flew to Caleb, who looked equally surprised. There's no... Is for hope, Miguel said with a grin. For future, maybe little warrior needs brother or sister. No. Anita's eyes went wide. A baby. Can we have a baby? The gathered crowd laughed at her enthusiasm. Clara felt her cheeks burn, but she was laughing too. Perhaps someday, she told Anita, if we're blessed. I want a sister, Anita declared, to teach her things, like you teach me, as the informal ceremony continued, with songs and stories and shared food. Clara found herself overwhelmed by the simple beauty of it. No church walls, no official words, but something deeper, a community choosing to recognize and support love in all its forms. Later, as stars began to appear, the three of them sat apart from the others, Anita drowsing against Clara's shoulder. The necklace at her throat caught moonlight, silver bright as promise. No more running, Caleb said quietly. Whatever comes, we face it here, together. Together, Clara agreed. She thought of the woman she'd been, Catherine O'Malley, always ready to flee, trusting no one, belonging nowhere. That woman felt like a stranger now, a ghost from another life. She was Clara Wolf Runner now, in all ways that mattered. Mother to a brave girl who'd found her voice. Partner to a man who'd chosen her as surely as she'd chosen him. Healer in a community that valued her skills. Part of something larger than herself. Mama, Anita murmured sleepily. Tell the story. Which story, sweetheart? Our story, how you stitched Papa and stayed. So Clara told it, there under the desert stars. How a wounded man and a silent child had changed her life. How love had grown from necessity. Trust from shared danger. Family from choice rather than chance. She told it as Anita liked to hear it, with all the fear transformed into adventure, all the pain into growth. By the time she finished, Anita was deeply asleep. Caleb took the child gently, carrying her toward their home. Clara followed, one hand touching the necklace that marked her as chosen, as choosing. At their door, Caleb paused. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For seeing us, for staying, for becoming who you were meant to be. Clara smiled, thinking of that first night in the line shack, how close she'd come to riding away. I was just hired to stitch a wound. No, Caleb said, shifting Anita in his arms to free one hand, which he placed over Clara's heart. You were sent to stitch a family back together, to show us we could heal,
to teach us we deserved love. Inside their small home, they tucked Anita into bed together, the simple domestic ritual now precious in its ordinariness. The child murmured something about sisters and horses, then settled into peaceful dreams. Clara and Caleb sat by their window, watching stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges the ranch always needed tending. There were other families fleeing Thornton's remnant supporters. And yes, maybe someday that cradle board would be filled. But tonight, they were complete. Tonight, they were home. The necklace lay warm against Clara's throat, silver promise of belonging. She'd been hired to stitch a wound. She'd stayed to stitch a life. And in the weaving together of 3 broken souls, she'd found something she'd never dared hope for, a love that didn't demand she be anyone but herself, a family that chose her as fiercely as she chose them, a place where running was no longer necessary. Caleb was right. She hadn't been hired. She'd been sent, by fate, by spirits, by the simple human need for connection that draws wounded souls together. And she would spend the rest of her life being grateful for that wound that needed stitching, that child who wouldn't let go, that man who'd seen her truly and loved her still. In the desert night, coyotes sang their ancient songs. Inside the adobe walls, 3 hearts beat in sleeping rhythm, and somewhere in the space between earth and stars, Clara swore she felt a presence warm, approving, peaceful. Elena, perhaps, satisfied that her family was complete. Or maybe it was just the night wind through cottonwood leaves, the settling of a house around its sleeping occupants, the quiet breathing of love at rest. Either way, Clara Wolfrunner was home. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through the Old West. If you enjoyed this story of Clara, Caleb, and little Anita finding their way to becoming a family, I'd love to hear from you. Please comment below and let me know where in the world you're listening from. It's amazing to connect with fellow Wild West story lovers across the globe. If this tale touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Wild West Stories 1850 for more authentic frontier stories filled with love, adventure, and the triumph of the human spirit. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed today's story. And please press the hype button to help share this story with more listeners who appreciate tales of courage, family, and second chances in the American frontier. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunset.